In the weeks that followed, his name spread beyond Africa. Students in Europe quoted him. Activists in Latin America echoed his message. Even within the United Nations, the ripple was felt. A quiet one, but a deep one. That one speech didn't rewrite history, but it reminded the world that Africa is no longer silent, that its people have voices, and that those voices are growing louder. The power of that day wasn't in how loudly he spoke. It was in how deeply he believed what he was saying. That belief, that fire, carried in every word. And maybe, just maybe, it awakened something in those who listened. Even if they didn't show it on their faces, Traoré didn't go there to make friends. He went to speak for the millions who never had a voice in that room. And in doing so, he made history. Not the kind that gets written into textbooks, but the kind that lives in the hearts of those who watched and felt seen for the first time. That was the day the United Nations went silent. Not because it didn't care, but because it didn't know how to answer. Outside those walls, the world responded quickly. News channels began to replay the clip. Social media exploded. Millions watched as a young African leader dared to say what many had only whispered behind closed doors. In Burkina Faso, the streets erupted in pride. His words were painted on walls, shouted in schools, replayed on local radios. Young people across the continent began to speak about sovereignty in a new way. Speech wasn't just a moment, it became a symbol. Western media didn't know how to react. Some called him dangerous. Others called him bold. But what no one could deny was this. For the first time in decades, someone had gone to the heart of global diplomacy and made it shake. He didn't need violence. He didn't need war. Just words. Truthful, fearless, raw words. He didn't stop there. He spoke of Africa's history, how its resources had been taken, how its leaders had been pressured, how global institutions like the United Nations were used to maintain control behind the curtain of diplomacy. He talked about debt traps, about puppets in suits who sold their people's futures. He talked about the wounds of colonialism that still bled under the surface, hidden behind aid programs and foreign partnerships. But more than that, he spoke about hope. He painted a picture of a self-reliant Africa, a continent that no longer waits for help but builds its own destiny. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't beg for recognition. He claimed it. As he continued, you could feel the discomfort in the room. Delegates whispered quietly. Some avoided eye contact. A few looked defiant, but most were simply shocked. No one was used to hearing the truth in that room, at least not like this. For years, African leaders had come to the United Nations asking, pleading, negotiating. Traoré was different. He wasn't asking, he was announcing. When he finally sat down, the silence lingered. It was thick, heavy, no applause, no reaction, just silence. It was supposed to be just another session at the United Nations. The room was filled with diplomats in sharp suits, scrolling through prepared speeches, checking their time slots, waiting for things to move along as usual. But something felt different that day. Sitting among them wasn't a typical polished statesman, it was a soldier. A young man in a green military uniform and a red beret. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso. He wasn't here for diplomacy as usual. He was here with a message. As he stepped up to the podium, the atmosphere shifted. People noticed the calm in his walk, the fire in his eyes. Without a flashy introduction or scripted greetings, Traoré began to speak. His voice was steady, strong, deliberate. He didn't raise it, but each word cut through the air like thunder. He said, "We are not your colony. We are not your pawns. We are sovereign." In just those 3 lines, the room froze. Delegates who had sat through hundreds of speeches looked up. Some leaned forward. Some sat back, stunned. Silence filled the room, not respectful silence, but a stunned one. something rare had just happened.